Well, there's clearly been a reduction in violence. What do you say to the critics who argue that by financing militia groups, you're actually creating the conditions for a long-term return of civil unrest, civil violence?
You all went through this in Northern Ireland, sat across the table from individuals who a couple of years earlier were swinging pipes at your lads, as they say, and that process has to go forward. You can't kill yourself out of this problem. You're not going to kill or capture or run off all of your enemies. You have to determine who are the reconcilables and try to help make them a part of the solution rather than a continuing part of the problem.
But the number of troops committed in Iraq cannot be maintained, something General Petraeus is going to have to deal with.
We are on the verge of destroying two very vital components of our armed forces, the Marine Corps and the Army. We are already in the Army 15,000 captains short. We are at the point where the tab alone for bringing my Army back up to where it was in early March 2003, before the invasion, is somewhere around $100 billion. Not to mention the fact that the morale of many of the troops is really conflicted now. They are disintegrating in front of our faces.
The Iraq quagmire has also left America unable to deploy troops elsewhere. Colonel Paul Hughes was responsible for rebuilding the Iraqi army after the invasion.
If you look at the world, the credibility of the United States is now undercut because people know that we are tied up in Iraq. As one of my colleagues put it, everybody notices when Gulliver is tied down. And we are tied down in Iraq. Our country's Army and Marine Corps are committed decisively in Iraq. If something else happened around the world's one superpower is going to be very hard stressed to take care of that contingency wherever it might be.
Meanwhile, other potential superpowers have been spreading their reach around the world.
China has been moving rather aggressively in the world while we're occupied in this strategic failure. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand that China is on a march in the world, and its march is greatly aided and abetted by the fact the United States is so focused on its failure in the Middle East.
For all these reasons, the surge can't last. The 30,000 extra troops will be out by July, and the same again may follow by year-end, leaving America's new friends vulnerable. Khalid served as a lieutenant colonel in Saddam's army. With American help, he is setting up a CLC to protect his neighborhood.
When did you decide that the Americans weren't evil bastards and they were on your side? There is a plan, as you may know, that in 3 months' time the Americans do start to pull out. I mean, what do you think of that plan?
لا مو صحيح. راح تكسحني. فما معناته تجيني انت جيت الوقت تلقيني ميت. ما معناته راح نقعد ناخذ قواطع دفاعيه ننتظر الهجمه من اي منطقه.
These men have put their blood on the line, all of them, and it's why we've grown very close to these men. They've been very brave, and every day they go out there, and there's a lot of risk. We can't be there all the time. I can't station troops in his house. I'd love to, but you know we don't have the people.
Khalid has bet everything he has on the Americans. But what will happen when the Americans start to pull out?
We're now for the first time doing this very strange thing, which is having supported the Shia and allowed the Shia militia to arm, we're now arming some Sunni militia. And this, of course, means that when we depart, well, both those groups are now considerably more powerful and considerably more confident if they wish to go into conflict and civil war.
The Americans admit to financing, but not arming, the Sunni militias, or CLCs. But their very creation is weakening the control of central government.
The desire for security trumps everything else. They have concluded that to have security, we have to cut separate deals with Sunni tribes and give them money and allow them to have weapons. They are not part of that same central Iraqi government. That central Iraqi government does not want to empower them. And so the cost of pursuing security and getting our troops out is doing away with the notion of a unified, empowered Iraqi government. I think the United States has pretty much given up on that.
John Bolton was part of George Bush's inner circle. He thinks it's now up to the Iraqis to solve their problems of governance.
I don't think America has an interest one way or the other in competing political forces inside Iraq. I think the question whether Iraq can survive as a civil state is an issue that Iraqis themselves will have to determine. And this was perfectly obvious from the outset. America's strategic interest today is ensuring that no part of Iraq become a base for international terrorism. And I think from that perspective, the precise form or scope of the government or governments that replace Saddam is of less compelling interest, except to the extent it affects that strategic objective that I've just stated, keeping the terrorists from establishing a base of operations inside Iraq.
The surge in Baghdad has driven al-Qaeda fighters 40 kilometers northeast to Baquba. I've joined a US air assault on the village of Dulim as they try to dislodge the insurgents' bases.
They're not going to go into the village until daylight because it's too dangerous to go in nighttime with all kinds of booby traps.
2 weeks before, 6 US soldiers died in this area when a house rigged with explosives detonated above them. Last year was the deadliest for US troops since the beginning of the war, with over 800 killed. By early morning, the troops are searching houses. Al-Qaeda regularly use the village and intimidate the locals into hiding them.
When was the last time you saw the men with the mask? I think once the initial fear gets through, the people are glad to see us. And as they see when we start setting up security, I think they'll be a lot happier.
This war is in the interest of al-Qaeda. It is not in the U.S. interest. We couldn't do anything would please al-Qaeda more than to open up Iraq and make it available to them. Rather than destroying al-Qaeda, we have invigorated it and swelled its ranks.
Is the only weapon they have in here?
We're going from house to house in this village, knocking on the doors, going in, asking if they've seen Al-Qaeda, if they've got weapons, and searching the houses. They all have seen Al-Qaeda. They say they use the village as a staging post. They see them every day.
They were not there prior to our presence in Iraq. They are there now because of our presence in Iraq, and they will be gone when our presence is gone.
That was close. That was really...
I think they're bombing suspected Al-Qaeda positions around here. The huge artillery bombardment accompanying our drive through the area.
Just start laying this yard, bro.
It was one of the largest aerial bombardments in a single day since the beginning of the war.
The war, or the invasion, of course, was justified in large part as an attack on al-Qaeda. One of the things bin Laden said early on is that he can win by drawing the Americans into what he called bleeding wars, where he waves the al-Qaeda flag and we come with a big invasion force and we anger Muslims even further. What a great recruiting tool to have the Americans invade Iraq. The Iraq War has been a plus for al-Qaeda and the terrorists rather than a minus.
By dusk, the operation had seized 4 al-Qaeda suspects. Even if the security situation can be solved, there is a larger problem. I'm heading to the regional capital, Baquba. It was only seized back from insurgent control last year. just as the Americans are trying to build up security in Iraq from the ground up through the concerned local citizens groups. So they're also trying to build up civil society. That means here in Bakuba that they're trying to build up banking, the economy, infrastructure, local services and local government. The job of Captain Martin is to support the local mayor as he tries to get basic services like electricity, water and sewage to work.
Your people aren't showing up.
12 heads of local departments are supposed to be at this meeting. Only one has turned up and another has sent his deputy. Absenteeism is not the only issue.
The last mayor was caught trying to blow up this building. He was a fully fledged member of the insurgency. This mayor, the Americans say, is on the side, but he's paying a price. His brother has been kidnapped.
The mayor, Abdullah al-Hayali, is a Sunni who's had the job for a year.